The perfect machine meets the one thing it forgot. April 14th, 1943. 24,500 feet over Bremen, Germany. The cold is immediate and absolute. It presses through wool gloves and leather jackets, creeps along oxygen hoses, settles into bone. Inside the aluminum body of B-17F Flying Fortress No. 41 to 24,512, the air smells of heated oil, cordite residue, and breath trapped inside rubber masks. Engines roar in steady synchronization, for right cyclones pulling the bomber east toward a city already smudged black by flak bursts. Captain Harold Whitaker sits in the left seat, hands light on the yoke, eyes scanning the formation. 36 bombers stretch across the pale sky, silver shapes holding tight intervals. Every man aboard has memorized the aircraft. They trust it. They have been told it is the most survivable bomber ever built. A black puff blooms off the right wingtip. The bomber shudders. Another follows, closer this time. Flak fragments rattle against the fuselage like thrown gravel. In the nose, Lieutenant Samuel Klein hunches behind the Norden bomb sight, murmuring course corrections. In the waist, Staff Sergeant Eddie Morales grips his twin Brownings, eyes darting between clouds and smoke. Then something hits. There is no explosion, no fireball, just a hard metallic thud from somewhere aft, followed by a sudden slackness in the controls. Whitaker pulls back gently. Nothing happens. He tries again, harder. The yoke moves, but the aircraft does not respond. The Fortress begins a slow, sickening nose-down drift. Controls feel dead. Whitaker says into the interphone, forcing calm into his voice. Behind him, the co-pilot checks his own inputs. Same result. Elevator response is gone. The B-17 is armored in all the places that matter. Thick steel plates protect the cockpit. The radio room has shielding. Gunners sit behind hardened steel and plexiglass designed to deflect fragments and bullets. Self-sealing fuel tanks line the wings. The Fortress has been engineered, tested, approved. Except for one thing. Running along the upper fuselage, just beneath the thin aluminum skin, are steel control cables. They connect the pilot's hands to the elevators and rudder. They are precise, tensioned, critical. They are also completely unarmored. Another flak burst flashes behind the aircraft. The tail gunner, Sergeant Frank Dobbins, shouts over the interphone. He has lost power to his guns. Smoke drifts through the rear compartment. Somewhere between the radio room and the tail, a shard of steel has torn through the fuselage and severed both elevator control cables in a single instant. Whitaker knows what that means. Without elevators, the bomber cannot climb. It cannot hold formation. It cannot recover from a dive. Below them, Bremen grows larger. Months earlier, far from this frozen sky, a junior engineer named Lieutenant Arthur Collins stood in a drafting room at Wright Field, Ohio. He was 26, fresh from MIT, assigned to review damage reports coming back from 8th Air Force bombers. His job was not glamorous. He read after-action summaries. He traced diagrams. He noticed patterns. Again and again, aircraft returned with intact engines, intact wings, intact crews, but listed as lost. Again and again, pilots described sudden loss of pitch control after minor flak hits. Collins followed the reports down to the same notes scribbled in margins and typed in debriefs. Aircraft became uncontrollable. He pulled a cutaway diagram of the B-17 and stared at it for hours. The armor made sense. The redundancy made sense. But the control runs bothered him. Long stretches of cable exposed beneath skin no thicker than a coin. No shielding. No rerouting. He wrote a memo. It was short. Respectful. It suggested adding a narrow armored channel over the elevator and rudder control cables where they pass through the fuselage roof. Weight increase minimal. Performance impact negligible. Survivability potentially significant. The memo went up the chain and stopped. Senior engineers had already signed off on the design. Weight margins were tight. Production lines were running at full speed. Adding armor meant retooling, delays, questions. Besides, tests showed the probability of a single fragment severing both cables was statistically low. The Flying Fortress, they said, was already good enough. Back over Bremen, Whitaker reaches for the trim wheel, trying anything. The bomber continues its slow descent. Formation ships slide past, unable to help. Flak thickens as German gunners sense weakness. In the nose, Klein looks up from the bomb site. He understands now. This is not an engine failure. This is not fuel. This is something worse. The airplane itself has been disconnected from its pilots. Whitaker makes a decision. He orders the crew to prepare to bail out. The bomb bay doors remain closed. The target is forgotten. Survival is all that remains. As the fortress drops through 20,000 feet, another flak burst punches through the tail. The aircraft rolls slightly. Wind screams through a jagged hole in the fuselage. Men move with practiced urgency, clipping parachutes, shouting confirmations. This is how a perfect machine fails. Not from catastrophic fire, not from structural collapse, but from one overlooked line of steel, thin and unprotected, doing exactly what no one thought it would. The losses no one could explain. The first man goes out over Bremen at 18,000 feet. Staff Sergeant Eddie Morales does not hesitate. He steps into the slipstream and vanishes, a dark shape swallowed by cloud and smoke. One by one, parachutes bloom behind the falling fortress like pale flowers torn open by the wind. The bomber continues on, emptying itself of crew, lighter with every second, still drifting nose down toward enemy territory. Captain Whitaker is last. He holds the yoke until the very end, even though it no longer answers him. When he finally leaves the cockpit, the B-17 flies on for another 30 seconds before flak finishes the job, and it breaks apart over farmland west of the city. By nightfall, it is listed as another operational loss. At headquarters, the loss is filed under expected attrition. The mission report notes heavy flak. No fighters engaged. No fire observed before loss of control. There is nothing unusual on paper, but the numbers are starting to add up. By late spring of 1943, the 8th Air Force has enough data to drown a man in. Bombing missions over Germany produce reams of statistics. Altitude, ammunition expended, flak density, aircraft damaged, aircraft destroyed, crew casualties. On the surface, the flying fortress performs as advertised. Many aircraft return riddled with holes. Some land with engines out. Others limp home with chunks of wing missing. Crews talk about walking away from machines that look like scrap metal. And yet, a troubling category keeps growing. Aircraft lost without catastrophic damage. Colonel Benjamin Maynard, operations officer for the 1st Bombardment Wing, notices it first. He is not an engineer. He is a pilot with thousands of hours and an instinct for patterns. During briefings, he listens carefully to returning crews. He hears the same phrases repeated in different voices. Controls went soft. Could not pull out. Would not respond. Maynard requests a deeper analysis. The request filters down to the engineering liaison teams attached to the bomber groups. Damage reports are pulled. Wreckage photographs are re-examined. Diagrams are marked with grease pencil. Lieutenant Arthur Collins is called into a meeting room he has never entered before. The room smells of cigarette smoke and stale coffee. Maps cover the walls. Officers stand instead of sitting. Collins feels painfully young in his pressed uniform, clutching a folder that contains his old memo. A major gestures for him to speak. Collins lays out his case carefully. He does not accuse. He shows diagrams. He points to control cable routing. He overlays damage reports and impact points. He shows that a single flak fragment, traveling at the right angle, can sever both elevator cables where they run close together. Someone interrupts him. The probability is too low. Another officer points out that combat damage is chaotic. You cannot armor everything. Collins listens. He waits. Then he opens the folder to a single page. It is a hand-typed list of aircraft serial numbers. Beside each one is a short note. Lost after loss of control. No fire observed. Crew bailed out. There are more than 50 entries. The room goes quiet. Still, nothing happens immediately. Production lines cannot stop. Aircraft are already rolling off assembly plants in Seattle and Long Beach. Engineers argue that rerouting cables would require structural changes. Adding armor would affect center of gravity. Manuals would need rewriting. Training films would become obsolete. The system resists change. Meanwhile, the losses continue. June 1943. Over Kiel. A B-17 takes a glancing flak hit near the dorsal turret. The shell does not explode inside the aircraft. It simply punches through and exits. 30 seconds later, the bomber slips out of formation and dives into the sea. July 1943. Over Hamburg. A fortress absorbs damage that would have destroyed any other aircraft. 3 engines are out. Fires are extinguished. The crew fights the plane for 15 minutes. Then, without warning, pitch control disappears. The aircraft rolls inverted and breaks apart. Pilots begin to talk among themselves. They call it the dead yoke. Some crews tape improvised steel plates near control runs using scrap armor scavenged from wrecked aircraft. Ground crews look the other way. No one reports it officially. At right field, Collins watches the statistics climb and feels the weight of every number. These are not abstractions. He knows men flying these aircraft. He has sat across from them in mess halls. He has read their letters on bulletin boards. Finally, the data reaches a tipping point. A report lands on the desk of a general who does not like unanswered questions. He orders a controlled investigation. Not theoretical, not statistical, physical. An aircraft will be sacrificed. A B-17 is rolled onto a test range. Armor plates remain in place. Control cables are left exposed. Flak fragments are fired at precise angles based on combat data. Cameras roll. On the third test shot, a fragment passes through the fuselage roof and snaps both elevator cables cleanly. The bomber pitches forward on the rig. No explosion, no fire, just silence. The room of observers does not need interpretation. The overlooked vulnerability is no longer theoretical. It is proven. The question is no longer whether the junior engineer was right. The question is how many men paid the price before anyone listened. The fix no one wanted to authorize. August 1943. Right field, Ohio. Rain streaks down the windows of the hangar as the test aircraft sits stripped and exposed under harsh electric lights. Its skin panels have been removed along the spine of the fuselage. The control cables lie bare, stretched taut like veins, running from the cockpit toward the tail. What once seemed elegant in its simplicity now looks fragile. Lieutenant Arthur Collins stands at the edge of the group, notebook in hand, watching senior engineers argue in low, controlled voices. The test results are undeniable. The vulnerability exists. It has been reproduced, filmed, measured, but proof is not permission. One engineer points to a chalkboard covered in figures. Added armor means added weight. Weight means reduced range. Reduced range means fewer targets. Another warns about balance shifts. The fortress was tuned carefully. Change one element, and the rest must be recalculated. A colonel from procurement reminds them that thousands of aircraft are already in service. Modifying them all would require time, labor, and resources that are already stretched thin. No one says it out loud, but the implication hangs in the air. The war will not pause for improvements. Collins clears his throat and speaks again, quieter this time. He does not argue theory. He talks about geometry, about how the cables converge as they pass over the radio room, about how a fragment does not need to explode to kill an aircraft. It only needs to cut 2 lines. He suggests a compromise. Do not reroute the cables. Do not redesign the airframe. Add a narrow armored channel over the exposed run. Thin steel. Bolted, not welded. Installed in the field if necessary. The room goes still. This is not elegant engineering. It is a patch. A violation of doctrine that says solutions must be clean, balanced, approved from the ground up. But it would work. A brigadier general who has lost friends over Schweinfurt asks a single question. How much does it weigh? When Collins answers, the general nods. He asks another. How long to install? Hours, not days. That night, a decision is made without ceremony. No press release. No announcement. The modification is classified as a field survivability improvement. It will not be highlighted. It will not be celebrated. It will simply be done. Within weeks, kits begin arriving at bomber bases in England. Crates marked with dull stencils are unloaded quietly. Inside are curved steel channels, mounting brackets, bolts, and simple instructions. Ground crews are skeptical at first. The armor looks almost insignificant. A strip of steel running along the fuselage roof does not feel like something that changes the course of a war. Still, they install it. Pilots climb into modified aircraft and notice nothing different. The controls feel the same. The aircraft handles the same. No training manuals are updated. No briefings mention it. Then the missions resume. September 1943. Over Stuttgart. A B-17 takes a flak hit just behind the cockpit. The impact echoes through the airframe. The crew braces, waiting for the familiar dead feeling in the yoke. It never comes. The aircraft staggers, but holds. Elevator response remains. The pilot eases the nose up and stays in formation. Another mission. Another hit. Same result. Statistics begin to shift. Losses still occur. Aircraft are still shot down. Men still die, but a specific category shrinks. Bombers damaged, but uncontrollable become bombers damaged, but flyable. Pilots do not know why. They only know they can fight the aircraft longer. They can nurse at home. Back at headquarters, the data analysts notice the curve bending. They run the numbers again. Then again. The change is undeniable. Collins receives no commendation. His name does not appear in any citation. He continues his work, moving on to the next stack of reports, the next pattern waiting to be seen. Over Germany, Captain Whitaker's fate quietly becomes rarer. Crews take hits in the same places, at the same altitudes, under the same flak. But now, the machine holds together just long enough. Just long enough to save them. Proof written in returning aircraft. October 11, 1943. 26,000 feet over Münster, Germany. The formation flies into a wall of black bursts so dense it looks solid. Flak erupts at precise intervals. German gunners walking their fire through the sky with grim efficiency. B-17 number 42 to 31,509 shudders as fragments rake across its fuselage. The aircraft lurches, metal screaming, men shouting into oxygen masks. Lieutenant Charles Brenner feels the impact through the yoke. It is not violent. It is worse. It is the kind of hit that in months past would have meant the end. He pulls back instinctively. The aircraft responds. Not cleanly, not easily, but it responds. In the radio room, a jagged hole the size of a helmet vents icy air. A steel fragment lies on the floor, still warm. It has gouged the armored channel installed weeks earlier, leaving a deep scar. Beneath it, the control cables remain intact, vibrating with tension as the bomber claws for stability. The crew does not see the channel. They do not know it exists. They only know they are still alive. Brenner holds the bomber in formation long enough to release its bombs. On the way out, fighters pounce. The fortress takes more damage. One engine burns. Another is shut down. Still, the aircraft flies. When it finally lands in England, ground crews swarm it. They count over 100 holes. They photograph the damage. Someone notices the gouge in the armored strip and traces it with a finger. Word spreads quietly. By November, maintenance officers are requesting the kits specifically. They prioritize aircraft flying the deepest penetrations. They retrofit older models first. No one waits for official instructions anymore. The data follows. Return rates climb by fractions of percentages that mean everything. Crews that once would have bailed out now limp home. Men walk away from aircraft that should not exist. At command level, the fix is no longer debated. It is simply assumed. Training materials are updated without fanfare. New production lines integrate the armor seamlessly, as if it had always been part of the design. Future models of the Flying Fortress roll out with protected control runs built into their skeletons. No footnote marks the change. In letters home, pilots describe impossible survivals. They write about holes they can see daylight through. They write about flak hits that felt final but were not. They do not write about control cables or armor channels. They write about luck. In reality, luck has been engineered. Arthur Collins reads those letters when they appear on bulletin boards. He recognizes the missions. He recognizes the altitudes. He knows exactly which line of steel made the difference. He never corrects anyone. By early 1944, the pattern is so clear that analysts stopped tracking it separately. It has become normal for damaged aircraft to remain controllable. What was once exceptional is now expected. The overlooked vulnerability has been closed. Not by doctrine, not by theory, but by listening to what the battlefield was trying to say. The quiet change that reshaped survival. January 5, 1944. Dawn over East Anglia. Frost clings to the wings of parked bombers, turning olive drab and bare metal white in the early light. Ground crews move slowly, breath fogging the air as they pull covers and check fittings. The war has not grown easier. Targets are deeper, defenses are heavier, but something fundamental has shifted. Crews trust their aircraft more than they did 6 months ago. Briefings are still tense. Maps still end in red lines deep inside Germany. The odds are still brutal. But pilots no longer talk about sudden helplessness. They talk about damage they can fight through. A B-17 lifts off the runway heavy with fuel and bombs. It carries the same guns, the same armor, the same engines as its predecessors. The difference is invisible to anyone not looking for it. Above the radio room, a narrow strip of steel runs along the fuselage spine. It is not elegant. It is not celebrated. It simply exists. On missions over Leipzig and Berlin, bombers absorb punishment that once would have meant certain loss. They lose engines. Hydraulics fail. Fires burn. Yet control remains. Crews stay with their aircraft longer, and staying longer means staying alive. Commanders notice another effect. Formation discipline improves. Aircraft that once would have dropped out now hold position. Bomb patterns tighten. Mission effectiveness increases. The change meant to save lives also improves the bombing itself. No one predicted that. At engineering offices back in the United States, the lesson circulates quietly. Junior officers are encouraged to speak. Field reports are taken more seriously. Vulnerabilities are hunted, not dismissed. Arthur Collins receives a promotion and a transfer. His new assignment is broader now. He reviews systems across multiple aircraft types. He is careful, methodical, and persistent. He never assumes that approval means perfection. Years later, he will say that the most dangerous failures are not dramatic. They are subtle. They live in the spaces between systems, in places no one thinks to armor because nothing has gone wrong there yet. The flying fortress continues to fly through the worst the Luftwaffe can throw at it. It earns its name not because it is invulnerable, but because it can be wounded and still fight. And in that difference, thousands of men come home. What the battlefield finally taught them. May 7, 1945. Northern Germany. The war in Europe is ending. Airfields that once roared without pause are quiet now. Bombers parked wingtip to wingtip, their skins dulled by weather and combat. Crews wander among them in loose groups, hands in pockets, voices low, as if afraid to break the spell. Many of these aircraft should not be here. They bear scars that would have doomed earlier machines. Control surfaces patched, fuselage panels mismatched, paint burned away in streaks where fires once licked. Yet they stand, solid and whole. An officer walks the line, running a hand along the spine of one bomber. Beneath the metal skin, he knows what lies there. A strip of steel added not by grand design, but by hard-earned understanding. No ceremonies mark it. No plaques are mounted. The manuals list it plainly, as if it had always been obvious. In the post-war years, engineers will study the flying fortress and marvel at its toughness. They will praise its redundancy, its guns, its self-sealing tanks. Few will mention the overlooked vulnerability that once cost so many lives, or the junior engineer who noticed it. But the lesson endures. Wars do not care about approval stamps or elegant schematics. They expose what matters by breaking what does not work. Survival belongs to those willing to listen when reality contradicts doctrine. The most important part of the machine was not the one everyone admired. It was the one no one noticed until men started falling out of the sky.